signal. Welcome to Nothing Else is On, the show you are watching because nothing else is on. I am Andrew. I'm the campus pastor at the Leawood campus of Christ Community. To my immediate left is Pastor Tim Spanberg at our Shawnee campus, and to his left, Pastor Bill Gorman at our Brookside campus. So you're probably already wondering, why am I watching this? I'm glad you asked. We were brainstorming a few months ago, I guess, weeks. Does anyone know what time it is in COVID anymore? I don't know. So, and we thought sometime before right now, we thought, hey, we're preaching through the book of Revelation as a church, and we know that that is a really confusing book. It's an often misinterpreted book, misapplied book. And we thought, man, we're not going to be able to cover all of the details or questions that people may have about this book on a Sunday morning. So what if we did something in the middle of the week where we could maybe talk a little bit more in depth and answer questions that we're getting as a church? And so to that end, we actually have a text-in phone number where you can grab your phone while you're watching, text in any question you have about Revelation or about Tim's beard or about Bill's hair. All of that's game.
Yep.
And Tim's running tech tonight, and he is going to drop those questions in to kind of guide some of our time. And so if something goes wrong with that or your question isn't chosen, you know who to blame. It's Tim tonight. That was kind of reason number one. Reason number two is we thought we could do that all separately, try to answer questions about Revelation, but why don't we do it together, at least three of our 5 campus pastors at a time, because we mostly like each other. We have fun together, and we thought we would do it better together. So, and we wanted to include as many people into this conversation as we could, so that's where you guys come in. And we're going to do, Bill's going to share a little bit in just a minute, kind of on how to read the book of Revelation, how do we interact with this book to kind of prime the pump. But start sending your questions in now. Tim's going to be watching for those, and we'll get to those kind of right after that. But before we do any of that, you guys, I kind of wanted to do a little icebreaker. So here's what we got. What is our favorite apocalyptic movie? Because obviously when you talk about Revelation, you think of really bad apocalyptic movies.
Yeah.
Mine is actually, I'm going to go first. Mine is actually a really good apocalyptic movie, at least in my opinion. It's The Matrix. Came out in 1999. Wow. Keanu Reeves. Larry Fishburne, Lawrence Fishburne.
Lawrence Fishburne, yeah.
And what I love about it is it's a kind of you could argue it's kind of post-apocalyptic, but I love that.
I'm just more
pre-apocalyptic. I know. Well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to the pre-post, mid-trib stuff. But what I really like about it is, like any good apocalyptic, kind of the bad guy at the end of the day.
Sorry, it didn't go live.
It went live like halfway, but I had to go to the website and never mind.
Bummer.
This is good practice.
That's a good warm-up, though.
I'm like, hey, it's not there. And Tim's probably thinking he didn't see it. So
I don't see it, but I wasn't looking for it
okay.
yet.
Yeah.
Just like everybody else.
Rewind, start from the beginning.
Go ahead and say something like the tech messed up around.
Yeah. Blame it on the tech.
Blame it on the.
Rewind. Let me get everything set.
Blame it
Got a
on
guy
the
Got a guy building his own kingdom in the sun, dude. We had to start it over. Oh man.
What if this is actually live right now? Somehow this is going out to the internet.
In some sense. I keep forgetting it's this one, right? All right.
I love this. Okay.
It's live, man.
If you've been watching this whole time, I apologize. If you're just tuning in, I also apologize. We've had a few technical issues. I think we're still on right now. But welcome to Nothing Else is On.
For a minute, nothing else was not on.
We're literally, not even this is on right now. I'm Andrew. I'm the campus pastor at our Leawood campus. Right here to my left is Tim Spanberg at our Shawnee campus. Say hi, Tim. Say hi to everybody.
Hey everybody.
This is Bill Gorman to his left, our pastor at our Brookside campus.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here tonight.
And if you're still with us, thank you. And maybe you're already wondering, should I keep watching this? So let me tell you a little bit why we decided to do this. So we are preaching through the book of Revelation as a church right now. In a couple of weeks or months or years, COVID has messed with my sense of time, so I don't know. A while back, we thought, hey, we're going to preach through the book of Revelation. We know we can't possibly get to every question, to every detail that we might want to cover on a Sunday morning. So how do we create maybe something in the middle of the week where we can go a little deeper in the book of Revelation? We know it's a confusing book. It's a often misapplied, misinterpreted book. So we wanted to spend a little more time with it. And to that end, we have a text number for you to text in your questions live, even as we're talking. Hopefully it's on the screen right now. And you can text any questions you have about the book of Revelation to that number, about Tim's beard, about Bill's haircut, whatever.
Actually, I cut my own hair.
Bill cuts his own hair, so delete that text. But we'd love to hear from you, so text those in throughout the night. And Tim is running tech tonight, so he is going to watch those questions as they come in and kind of help drip those in as we have conversation. And so if he doesn't pick your question or there's something goes wrong, you know who to blame. And I wanted to make sure you knew that as we started. So that's reason number one. We knew we wanted to go a little deeper and have space for questions around Revelation. But we also thought, rather than doing that all 5 of our campuses separately, why don't we do it together? So every Monday for the next several weeks, we're going to meet at this time. And 3 campus pastors will be here at one time. And we're going to talk together because we're better together in how we learn to interpret the Bible. So with all of that in mind, I did want to start us off with just a little icebreaker. So we're talking about Revelation, gets me thinking about apocalyptic movies. So I thought, why don't we all share our favorite apocalyptic movie? So I'm going to go first.
Okay.
Mine is The Matrix, 1999. Keanu Reeves in his prime.
Yes.
And what I love about that movie is, first of all, I did actually rewatch it, I don't know, like a year ago. And it really holds up. I didn't think it would because the technology has changed. It's like 20 years, it's a 21-year-old movie now.
It's crazy.
But I thought it really held up. And like any good apocalyptic, I love that basically, even though there are like the artificial bad guys, like the AI bad guys, it's really like humanity is the fundamental problem. Like we are our own worst enemy. And I feel like any good apocalyptic movie, that kind of has to be the message, is that we are our own worst enemy.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill, your turn.
Okay, so Andrew, you picked something really thoughtful and
Yeah. It's my brand.
When I think about my favorite apocalyptic movie, I actually remember this movie I watched with my dad a ton growing up, is the movie Mars Attacks, which is this great film.
Wow. The movie's horrible.
It's so good though. It's these aliens from Mars who come, and it's totally over the top and slapsticky.
Also
and
holds up.
It
really
does.
holds up.
It does. It's truly timeless film, and I won't give it all away, but it ends up that kind of this country western music ends up making the aliens' heads explode, but it's good stuff.
I don't think country western music just does that to aliens.
Right. I think it actually was the message of the movie. This music is deadly.
It saved the world.
Isn't Jack Nicholson is the president?
Yep.
That fits.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's good stuff.
All right, Tim.
All right, I went a little heavier with my pick of apocalyptic movie, but my best or favorite apocalyptic movie is Titanic,
Yeah.
which I feel like explains itself. Because by the end of that movie,
You want it to be the end
I
of the
just was
world?
like, Jesus, take me home. Actually, that's how I felt, and then there were still 2 hours
And then
left
there were still 2 hours.
in the movie.
Now, don't lie. That was like your third time watching it, right?
That was the first time, and I was like, could someone leave me in the ocean on a door so I can die and not have to finish watching this movie. But Titanic, that's mine. That's mine. That's my pick.
Oh, well, that's really great. Hopefully we get more thoughtful as the evening goes on. So in that spirit, Bill, we were kind of hoping you could spend a couple of minutes as questions come in, just answering the question, how do we approach this book of Revelation? It's really different. I know we've all spent time on Sunday morning probably doing a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to take a little more concentrated time together doing that. So take a couple minutes and tell us, how do we approach this book of Revelation? How do you read it?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the, I think this is one of the toughest books in the Bible to read for a number of reasons. One, there's so many different images that in of themselves are just, what do they mean? Two, I think the writer of the book of Revelation is assuming that you know the Old Testament really, really well. So for most of us, we don't have large chunks of the Old Testament memorized. We don't read Ezekiel and Zechariah on a regular basis. At least I'm a pastor. I don't do that regularly.
Those are books in the Bible.
Right. And so those are a number of challenges, but also just the whole genre, the whole type of literature that Revelation is. It's just one we're not used to reading at all. And really, another kind of challenge to this book is if you read, some of the best scholars on Revelation, Richard Bauckham's great book here, Theology.
Of course, Pastor Bill
Yeah,
brought.
I brought some books for show and tell.
We limited him to 4, though.
Yeah.
So.
But really argues this Revelation has kind of 3 different genres in it. So it is a letter, like Ephesians, Philippians are epistles, letters that someone's writing to a set of churches. Revelation is addressed to churches as a letter. It opens like a letter. So it has elements of being a letter. It begins and ends like a letter. But also you have elements of kind of that Old Testament prophecy genre as well, of kind of speaking to the moment of God's people. Why is judgment taking place? What's going on? And then you have this broader genre of apocalyptic, which is, we're talking, we know that genre from pop culture, films, apocalyptic books and movies. And when we think about apocalyptic in that sense, we really do think about the world ending. A movie about the world is in crisis, the world is coming to an end.
The ship is sinking.
Or like really desiring the world to end
or yes,
while watching the movie. Yeah, got it.
But when that language is used in the Bible, it doesn't necessarily just mean about this cataclysmic event where everything in the world is coming to an end. And so I just want to take a minute and say, how is the language or this genre of apocalyptic used in the Bible? So actually in the very first verse of Revelation, you get this word. It's a Greek word, apocalypsis. But I'm reading the ESV here. It says the revelation, and that's that word apocalypse or apocalypsis. And it really just means to, at its most basic sense, to uncover. So, I mean, you could, if Tim was wearing a mask and it was covering his beard, and then he takes that mask off, he's apocalypsing his beard.
Or if I shaved my beard,
that would be more apocalyptic.
Yeah, for sure. But you'd be apocalypticing your face, right? You're uncovering. And so I wanted to just read a couple other references where you get this kind of language being used, but not in the kind of genre of what we think about as apocalyptic. So for instance, in Matthew, Matthew chapter 8, Jesus is in the boat with the disciples, and it says this, and behold, a great storm arose in the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves. That's the same word, apocalypse. It's being covered over by. It's being completely covered by the waves.
Okay.
And so you add this op to that word cover, and it means to uncover, right? So here's another great example of this. When Jesus is later on, this is Luke chapter 8, he says, no one after lighting a lamp covers it with a jar or puts it under, but put it on a stand so you can see the light. So this idea of covering. Probably even a better one, though, where you get this contrast is in Matthew chapter 10. Again, Jesus is teaching here. He's using this language. But he says, have no fear, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed. So you have both this idea of covering and then apocalypse will be revealed, or hidden that will not be made known. So really this genre of apocalyptic is about taking something that's hidden, something that's not obvious, something. Actually, The Matrix is a great example of this, in the sense of you
Thanks,
get
Bill.
this. Yeah, I mean, you were right on, man.
I came prepared.
Right,
Yeah.
you take the right pill, and all of a sudden you see what is really real.
Yeah, the curtain of reality is pulled
Pulled back. Yes.
So Revelation is like Is it the red pill?
I can never remember. Is it the red pill or the blue pill?
I don't
I can't
know.
remember. But it is. That's exactly what it is. It's like, do you want to see what is really real? Another great example of this is actually the scene in The Wizard of Oz where Toto the dog pulls back the curtain in the
And
big.
it turns out it's just this crazy
guy.
old man.
Yeah. So thus, right. He's showing what is truly real in that moment. He's apocalypsing the wizard. So that's a little bit. I think that's helpful to. This is not just about like giving us a timeline or sequence of events to determine a precise date of when the world is going to end. It's about revealing what's really real and how we're often deceived by what's really real in our world. Yeah.
I've really appreciated, just even in my own study, that clarification that Revelation isn't just about what will happen, but what is happening from God's perspective, from a heavenly perspective in one sense. And I'm really indebted to, I mean, I know you guys are too probably, but to Tim Mackey and the Bible Project and
So
really
good.
clarifying, hey, Apocalypse it really has this character of revealing. Like this is one of the primary senses of this book, is revealing what's real and not just predicting something in the future. In light of that, speaking of revealing, do we have any questions coming in that we want to cover?
Yeah, we've got questions.
Okay.
I think so. Something you guys
About the Titanic or about?
I mean, well, I'd love to talk.
Could you
about
go to the page?
No. So how? So you guys were just mentioning. So it's maybe not necessarily revealing what's in the future, but also revealing what's happening now. So a lot of times when I hear people talk about Revelation, it's like, man, I've got my newspaper on one hand, and it's like, is that? Who's that? Is that? And then Revelation on the other hand, and they're going together. So when it comes to reading Revelation, should we be looking to current events as fulfillments of what we're reading in Revelation? How would you address someone asking that question?
Yeah. So basically, should I be looking for fulfillments of this book in my newspaper
Yes.
every morning?
Yeah.
How do those relate? That's a good question.
Or like on my news feed. I feel like we read newspapers. I don't know. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. A little old school there.
No. I think I'll respond first. I'll let Bill go after me.
Yeah, okay.
I think the imagery of the book of Revelation serves a really, really important purpose. But I think we have to remember that this book is not primarily a set of keys or clues for some future generation to then unlock, as much as it was something relevant, prophetic, and apocalyptic to first to a specific generation of the church, and then obviously is relevant and written for other generations of the church. But this is, I mean, I was just talking to my wife about this recently. Like, it's a really, really strange idea to think that Revelation is most relevant in 2020.
Right.
In terms of being able to say, oh, this means this headline in the newspaper.
Right.
Because what you're saying is, okay, for 2,000 years, that was completely irrelevant
Right.
for the Christian community. And there's just, in my mind, that just makes absolutely no sense.
And usually those things tend to center on sort of Western world as well. So what about people
Yeah, it's very monocultural.
yeah,
and,
Sub-Saharan Africa or other places where, are they...
Are they making this connection
Right.
between
Right.
the stock market and this?
Yeah. Which is good to also remember, we're reading this, we ought to read the scripture in community with not only those in our own time, but in the past, as
good.
well as the
Yeah.
global church as well,
Yeah.
because I think it can help safeguard us against some of those, like well-meaning, trying to read the Bible faithfully, but maybe just, it can help correct our framework a bit on that. Yeah.
Well, and even to add into that,
Yeah.
one thing I would say is there is something I think even understandable about that tendency in light of Revelation to look to current events, because I think as we get later into the book and you see kind of these patterns of judgment and disruption in the world and sort of these cyclical patterns that will happen through the book, I think they actually can, as we dig into those things, I actually think they can help us understand how to navigate our own current moment. So where maybe a particular image isn't referencing something that happened on Capitol Hill last week necessarily, but it does help us understand what happened in that moment, in that
good.
there's these cycles of of reality in the world that that Revelation speaks to, that are true throughout history. And Revelation is telling, hey, as a Christian, here's how you live faithfully in those moments of sort of worldwide disruption where it feels like the end is coming near. So that's my own little contribution to that.
I kind of want to put you on the spot. So, what in your most current, as you've read through Revelation most recently, because you're kind of saying what Revelation is doing is giving us a paradigm for navigating the times.
Yeah.
Not necessarily predicting the times, but it's a paradigm for what does it mean. In that sense, it is relevant for all time. So what's something that you've in light of 2020, so in light of what's going on right now, right? We got a pandemic, we got an election going on, it's a really divisive time, economic turmoil, all this stuff going on. So as you've read Revelation in light of that, what's something new or specific that you've drawn out this time around?
Yeah, maybe my headspace is just I'm just continuing to go back to watching Titanic for the
No, I was
Right
as I finished that question, I was like, he's gonna say something about Titanic.
No, so I think one thing that's true is so Revelation's written, I think, about 95 AD. So typically two answers have been given to that question, either 65, 70 AD, kind of right at the fall of Jerusalem, or more the Emperor Domitian, because Revelation is sort of preparing the church for a more robust persecution.
It's about to start.
It's about to happen.
Yeah.
It's been localized in certain places. So when you get in the 7 letters, you have the church in Smyrna and Philadelphia, which have already been persecuted. But now it's about to go broader.
That's true. You can already sense that the experiences are so different, even in the 7 churches.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And so what I think a lot of what Revelation is doing is it's not just unveiling or revealing Jesus to us. It's also unveiling and revealing what Rome actually is to the people who live in that time. So Rome seemed like inconquerable, powerful, no way we can resist it. And actually, Revelation is going to say, actually, that's not the case. And so, in addition to that, then, as a Christians, it's a preparation for suffering and potential persecution. Now, I don't want to overplay that from an American context, but with our primary global partner being in China, that's what they're experiencing right now, is a preparation. They've been speaking of this for 3 to 4 years. Preparation of increased persecution being their reality. I mean, I do think there's a sense in which, in our own American context, faithful Orthodox Christianity is more and more viewed with very suspicious and increasingly hostile eyes. And so that's where I think Revelation, while it may not predict specific events that may happen in 2022, it's preparing us for what life looks like when an empire is set against the church. Both what does suffering and persecution look like, but also promise of victory and conquering the cultural context you're in. So even thinking about, like, we're reading this 2,000 years after Rome, and it did fall, and the church did, in many ways, conquer Rome through its faithful witness to the gospel. So I think for me, as I've been reading through and preaching through the book, that's been the thing for me, is like, okay, I can get prepared to suffer for the name of Jesus, because when you take the 2,000-year view, his kingdom continues to expand and grow and be victorious.
What about you, Bill, as you've walked through this in 2020? It's a funny time to be talking about Revelation.
It is, and we planned to preach on this book long before there was a goal. We what was it, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that we decided to do this. So, it is an interesting time, and certainly have moments. Even talking with my wife early on in the pandemic, is this it? Are we in the end? Because
there are plagues,
right? It felt like there are some plagues, some pestilence, and it feels like we're in that for sure. But I think the thing that actually has struck me the most in this time about, like, how is this book speaking to me in this moment, and what is it revealing, is just the incredibly different way that God's people, that Christians, followers of Jesus, deal with power. And this idea of we follow a lamb who is slain. And I love the juxtaposition of the images between the Lion of Judah and the lamb who is slain. And you get this in Revelation 4 and 5, this great picture of the throne room, this really incredibly awe-inspiring, powerful piece. And it says, John, I heard the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and then he turns, and what does he see? The Lamb who is slain. And so we follow a Savior who is crucified, who conquered death by giving himself over to death. And we were just talking about this today in our teaching team meeting. There's this great line in Revelation 14 that just says, Christians follow the Lamb wherever he goes, and we follow him in this way of suffering. And so we don't get rid of power, but the way that we exercise power is the power to be last, to give up our rights, to sacrifice, to bear witness in the midst of suffering. And so that's just really, that's been what Revelation's been revealing to me, is this different kind of way of power. That Jesus doesn't confront Rome with the brute strength power that Rome had. Jesus confronts Rome by dying on a Roman cross. Just a very, very different way than my natural instincts about power and preservation work.
Yeah. All right, we got a question.
Okay.
And I think this is really the toughest one. I think one we'll continue to unpack. But in the way we're reading Revelation, so chapters, I think 1 through 3 are pretty easy to understand, right?
So easy.
Introduction,
Just
7
a
letters to the
cakewalk.
church. All right, Matrix. Chapters 4 through 22 then is
Right.
when we begin to break. When is this happening, or how is this happening?
Yeah.
So in your reading of Revelation, chapters 4 through 22, are those things that are going to occur in real space and time in the future, or is that just symbols, right? Just sort of a symbolic way of talking about the end times, but not referring to specific events, and maybe even think of one particular example in those chapters that might help us so we're not just talking in generalities, whether it's the 4 horsemen, whether it's the seals. I don't know, Bill, take that.
Yeah, so a couple things come to mind, and we might not actually all. So let me just say this: we might not all have the same answer to that question, and that's okay, because faithful followers of Jesus have been reading Revelation for a long time, and any view that we're going to talk about has a long history and of many faithful followers of Jesus holding that. And so
Yes.
this is a secondary issue conversation, and
Maybe.
Maybe. So a couple of things that come to mind there. An example, so part of the question was, are they referring to real events, or is it just symbols? And I think sometimes that's actually a false dilemma, a false dichotomy. And I think one way to talk about this is when you think about one of my famous painting by Van Gogh, The Starry Night. Probably if I was prepared, we could put an image of that up on the screen. But you've all seen Van Gogh's Starry Night.
People want to see us.
They'd be much better served by looking at classical art than by looking at our faces. But nonetheless.
That's just your opinion, man.
Keep going.
Yes. So I believe that Van Gogh was looking at the real sky in southern France when he painted The Starry Night. And it's not just a made-up thing out of his head. And yet, that is also a highly symbolic picture. He's not using a high-resolution DSLR camera to capture photorealism. But he's doing way more and communicating way more by using, in this case, the language of post-impressionism, and as a painter, to communicate meaning and significance and emotion, value, in a way that just a still photograph of the night sky in France never could. And so I think, when I look at Revelation, it's like, yes, these are real realities, but being depicted and talked about in symbolic ways to do that uncovering work. I also think the time horizon is interesting in Revelation too. So you have some views that say this is all past. This has all been fulfilled in the past. This is just only a historical document.
Yeah, Revelation is all about a period of time.
Yep.
And
It's just a history book, and we're just reading ancient history, and that's all it is. Others would say everything in this is future. None of this has been fulfilled yet. And I want to say this is a letter written to real Christians in the first century. So it had to mean something to them. God just didn't send them a code that was only going to be relevant 2,000 years after.
Hey, just keep copying this one.
Right, yeah. So I think this really speaks into their moment. And also, I think there is, again, you guys might have different, but that there are future fulfillments for some of this as well. But I think the most key part is that the symbols are trying to do that unveiling. It's trying to shape our imagination to view this world differently. And you wanted a specific example. I know Tim, you've done some work on even the kind of the seals and the timing on that. So
And the four horsemen.
And the
too.
four horsemen, yeah. So
Yeah,
what's
well,
that
and
about
I think that's a really good image to push into. So the four horsemen, which come out in Revelation in 6, with
Yeah.
the first four
It's the
seals.
first four seals.
So that question, I think the timing, and are there four horsemen that are being held back right now, just waiting for Jesus to be released, and it's like a real event. I think the first thing is Revelation is, and the Bible Project guys use this language, is meditation literature. You're supposed to read it and then go back and reread it again. And it's also
And again.
Yes. And so much of Revelation is referencing the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew scriptures. So
Don't they say that it's the most references to the
Yeah.
Old Testament of any New Testament
Oh,
book? Yeah.
It's almost any image you find in Revelation or anything in chapters 4 through 22, almost all of it is anchored in some Hebrew text.
Right.
So the four horsemen from Zechariah, which describe four horsemen coming out, and their job is to go and judge the peoples who God had used to judge Israel, actually, but had overextended their right to judge Israel by God. So now God is sending out four horsemen to go and judge the people who have been oppressive to God's people, to Israel. So when you bring that into Revelation 6, then what's going on, I think, at least in my reading of the four horsemen, is the first four seals are depicting actual violence and persecution and oppression against the church in particular. So that these aren't just four horsemen being let loose on the world for general suffering. It's directed in particularly towards the church, and that's why I think Seal 5 refers
that
to
interlude goes to
the Christians
the
underneath
martyrs.
the altar saying, God, make this stop. Please stop this. So if you go back, kind of the original context of Zechariah. That helps you. And then further in Revelation 7, where what I described yesterday or Sunday in my sermon is sort of hitting the rewind button and going back pre first four seals, where we read, after this I saw four angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding back the four winds of the earth, that no one might blow on the earth or sea or tree. It's like, well, where'd the winds come from? That's actually another reference to the horsemen, which again, because the horsemen are referred to that way in Zechariah. Both the four winds are present in Zechariah, so are the four horsemen.
Yeah.
So is there a moment when these four things are going to happen in succession in real-time space history? I'd probably say, I don't know. I'd lean towards, I don't think so, because of my own reading of Revelation. I think what's more important is how is Zechariah's context informing what John is seeing and creating the context that's there. And then I think that begins to help better answer the question of, will this happen in real space, time, and history based on what's being referred to. And honestly, I've got more work and meditation to do in Zechariah and in Revelation, again, as we proceed in the book to even answer that question more fully. But that's a great image of, it's so deeply rooted in Zechariah, and even the context that's in Zechariah is getting picked up in Revelation as well. And so it's almost like John is saying, hey, you need to go back and reread Zechariah and then come back and reread Revelation 6 again.
Yeah.
I think I obviously broadly agree with everything you guys said. I might have a little different take on the role of the four horsemen, just because in particular, I believe it's in the sixth seal, the whole earth says, hey, stop. And so I don't know I think I heard you right that you said they have a specific role among God's people. I feel like it's broader than that, but I mean, I don't know.
And I think it is, but
Yeah.
I think it's specifically directed towards the church because of the context of 6 and 7 in particular. So it's not just only the church is going to be affected by the four horsemen, but they are particularly affected by the suffering that's being let loose into the world. And there's a commentator named G.K. Beale. That's the way he reads.
that's the way.
text.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting.
And he's going.
I mean, I guess he's smart. I don't know.
yeah,
I never met him, but
He wrote a long book about it.
yeah,
It's a very long book.
yeah, I mean, he's
It's
cool.
like
He's cool.
those
He's cool.
books.
Yeah. I text him every now and then for my questions. But I'd probably only add that I also think, I think at least a part of what the Christian community is supposed to do is to look at this paradigmatically and say, yes, when the church in China and Iran and Africa, wherever, experiences persecution, they are again entering the story of Revelation. Is it a prediction that those specific events would happen in those countries at those times? No. but I do think it says it is predicting this is what this kind of church age is going to be like in a general sense. It's like we need to be prepared for this spiritually as a community. So I'm trying to look at the time.
About 30 minutes. We got maybe 10, 15 minutes to go. And
okay.
we're getting some great questions
yep.
In here. And one, I think that, my guess is a lot of people who are watching this have either
Turned it off.
They found something else that's on. Is a lot of my interactions with folks at our campus has been, hey, listen, I've heard this a number of times. I just don't read Revelation because I don't even know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Or it's
get
like this time I'm going to go in and read it, and it's like, no, okay, this is why I don't read this.
Run out of steam.
So what's the best way to navigate just the complexity of just sitting down to read Revelation? Do you just read it? Is there a study guide that you would put alongside it? As we think about people just wanting to engage the book, what's some practical tips in navigating the complexities of Revelation?
I am a big believer in, and this isn't going to make it easier to read Revelation for the first time, for example. But I'm a big believer in listening. And I think John's imagery in particular, much like much of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Old Testament, is written to the ear and is designed to engage your imagination through hearing. And so I would say get a Bible reading app. The ESV Online, you can click read. There was a really cool app someone just put on my radar where you can pick different accents and it was cool. It's like different ways of listening. But I think, in some ways, listening removes some of the intimidation of reading, especially when you go to a Bible like what you guys have, where there's annotations and there's notes, and it's really quickly overwhelming. Because the people who wrote this are trying to give you all those hyperlinks, like, hey, check this out, and hey, look at this, and hey, look at that. And sometimes that's overwhelming. So I'm a big believer in listening. And I would also say, and hopefully you guys have better advice than this, because this is a little, a little maybe unhelpful, but it's like any muscle. It's going to be hard the first few times.
Yeah.
And the Bible is designed to be reread and reread and reread and understood more and more in conversation, in prayer. There's always going to be a bit of a threshold that we're pushing. It's not meant to be. Revelation in particular is not meant to be immediately grasped, right? It's like you got to go back and read this again, and then you got to go look at some of those references and do some of the work that Tim described. What does that mean in this context? And yeah, that's a beginning of an answer anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. I love the idea of listening, and I've done that some, and it does. I think also listening keeps you moving.
Yeah, it's like a treadmill.
You can't.
It's like I have to keep moving my legs, or I'm going to fall down.
Right. So you can't get stuck and hung up, and eventually that meditation work requires you go back and ponder specific phrases. But especially just getting through the whole book, and I think that sometimes you read, you get stuck on something, and then you just don't go on. So listening helps just keep you moving. I would say a couple of things have been really helpful to me, and we've mentioned the Bible Project a couple of times tonight already. But they, in their Read Scripture video series, if you just put Google into Bible Project Revelation, it'll come up. But it'll give you kind of an overview of the whole book, an outline in kind of a visual form of a whole book, so you kind of get a sense of some things we're talking about tonight, but just even how the book fits together. And kind of on the flip side of what you were saying, actually, I think Revelation is one place where listen to it, but also having a good study Bible. I mean, this is the ESV study Bible or NIV study Bible is really good. That's going to give you some.
Here's what this image is getting at.
And a good evangelical study Bible like ESV or NIV, they're going to give you some commentators, interpreters take it this way. They're going to give you a range of options on how to understand these kind of things, and good, have good introductions, some good charts along the way. So I find just having a good study Bible, if you don't have one, is a great tool to have on your bookshelf. And I actually do like it as a book, but you can get all these as Kindle or whatever.
And Wikipedia has a great entry on Revelation. Sorry, don't do that.
Another
Whoever's watching, don't Wikipedia that.
This book too, this little book by Paul Spilsbury, The Throne, the Lamb, and the Dragon, A Reader's Guide to Revelation, has also been really, really helpful to me. It's 150 pages.
And it's one of the more
It's super
readable books
Yeah, I
on
mean,
Revelation you can find.
Yeah, this is
So-
not written to people with PhDs. This is just written to normal, everyday humans who want to try to understand Revelation better. And so, again, I love that Andrew's answer is just listen to this book, just soak in this book. But something like Spilsbury or like a good study Bible will just give you some handles and help you from just feeling like completely lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think just to build on what Jones said, I mean, the Revelation even begins with, blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this
Yes.
prophecy. Blessed are those who hear it. Because I think so much of Revelation is it's less about like understanding propositions and details, and it's more about being caught into a world that that expands our vision of the world in which we live. There's more going on around us than what we see, and by just listening to the book, it's okay if you don't get all the images, or if it's like I don't know, Zechariah, 4 horns of wheels. We talked like I thought that was from wrestling in the 1990s for those of you who watched WWF. But it's okay if you don't know all those things.
Yeah.
Instead, just to be caught into that world, I think that's so much of what Revelation is ultimately.
So
doing.
Titanic, WWF. That's on your scorecard
Guys,
tonight.
that's the content I bring, man. That's my contribution.
All right, maybe one more.
All right, one more question before the closing question. I think this is a good question of. Do we think there's been a shift in how Revelation is being taught and preached, communicated today, or should be taught? So as we think about Revelation as an interesting book, it's been dealt with in many different ways. As we think about how it's being treated now, do you notice a shift? Should there be a shift? How do you see the church engaging with Revelation?
I don't know if I've seen a shift. See, I'm at a little bit of it. I feel like I'm at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in the church. And so I know this is one of those books in particular where a lot of folks are formed pretty early on, maybe in their church or their school, like here's how you read Revelation. But like my first exposure to this book was very much like here's the historical ways that this book has been understood. And so I guess in that sense, I would just say, there's nothing new about different readings of Revelation. That's a really, really old phenomenon. I think the Christian community across the globe and throughout history has wrestled with what are the best ways to approach this book. So
Yeah. One thing I do, and maybe this is what this person is getting at, I do think sort of, and this is the world you didn't grow up in, Andrew, but evangelicalism in sort of the late 70s certainly through the 90s was really influenced by kind of the Hal Lindsey, Late Great Planet Earth, the Left Behind stories that take a particular reading, more of a dispensational kind of school of thought.
a very specific way of reading
Revelation. And again, I mean, I think really thoughtful Christians have studied their Bibles carefully along those lines. But I think that gained a lot of sway in popular imagination. And so if you're listening to our conversation here tonight and we're not pulling out a prophecy chart or kind of following a left behind script kind of thing, it might seem like, oh, is this new or different? And I mean, I think those, like you said, there's been, from the very early days of the church, I mean, different ways of trying to read and understand this book. But I do think more folks in the evangelical community, again, I don't have any data on this, but are starting to nuance maybe that left behind kind of popular imagination, dispensational approach to reading the book. Not saying that that's totally wrong or invalid way to look at the book, but just adding more depth and nuance to that. And so maybe feel like there's a bit of a shift. And I think even if you hold more of that position, I think all the conversation we've had here tonight can layer into that. I don't think it has to undermine that.
And not to nerd out too much, who is a really good like dispensational commentary on Revelation? I'm trying to think. Does Darrell Bach have a commentary on Revelation? I
Well,
don't think he does.
so Osborne, Grant Osborne, takes a pre-mill view, but I would probably say some of Charles Ryrie's Study Bible, or even Charles Ryrie's Basic Theology. If you just wanted to get kind of a handle on that, I'm trying to think of
Like a contemporary.
Yeah, I think it's the Tyndale commentary series. I can't think of the author.
The author, okay.
But
We'll try to
writes
figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to take that and dig into that, but Charles Ryrie is probably would represent that school of thought well.
The original.
Yeah.
The OG.
The OG dispensational
Yeah.
perspective.
Okay.
All right,
That was way nerdy. Now. Sorry.
Yeah,
for all
that's all right.
So that got in the weeds.
Nothing else is on.
Nothing else is on.
This is what they
Everyone
want.
stopped watching right at that moment. You're still with us.
But so last question, a question to go out on. I think, and even this book speaks to a question, a couple questions ago, which is just help us navigate the complexities of this book. But let's just think devotionally, applicationally. Why is it worth the effort to press into Revelation, to do hey, I'm getting, it's Monday night late. I'm going to bed. I'm going to wake up Tuesday. I'm going to read my Revelation tomorrow morning. Why should I do that?
Yeah, it's a great. Do you want to jump in there? Or?
I have a really nerdy answer, but I think it's good.
Okay.
You can tell me.
We will.
So I think what's really cool about Revelation is as you begin to unpack it, it pushes you to understand and unpack more and more of the whole Bible. And because there are so many allusions to the Old Testament prophets, to the Old Testament history, it really does, the more it pushes you to know the whole. And it reminds me a little bit, and I've been on a big Tolkien nerd out, so I read the Silmarillion, which has all of these allusions and references that you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And what it does is it forces you to go then research what does this little sentence mean? What does this line mean?
Yeah.
And the more you're able to do that and enjoy it, it actually pushes you to know more of the Bible in a really unique way.
Yeah. So I love that. I would just add, I think it's worth it because Jesus gave it to us. It's Jesus speaking to us.
I mean that makes sense.
But I mean, I have to remind myself that like he gave, Jesus wrote. I mean, it's so clear. This revelation of Jesus, he is speaking. Jesus has given us these words, and they're a treasure. And I think also one of the calls you hear over and over and over again is the call to faithful endurance. And I think it was Gabe who said this on one of our teaching team meetings. But Revelation is not just about informing us, but about forming us. And so that's the question I'm asking as I sit down to read this book devotionally. Is just like, Jesus, how are you trying to form me through these words that you've given me as a gift? And how will this help me to endure in a world? I mean, we can all say 2020 has been a tough year.
Yeah.
And Revelation is written to Christians who are having tough years, who are having tough situations, so that we can endure and be faithful to Jesus and not give up. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, mine would be, it's the apocalypse of Jesus, the unveiling of Jesus. And I think so often when I think of Jesus, I think of little Jesus snuggling a lamb, or Jesus on a cross, right? Jesus in a position of weakness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what Revelation reveals to us is that when he died, buried, was raised to new life, he ascended to the right hand of God, where he's described in Revelation 1 as the ruler of the kings on earth. And that vision just plays out. And so the details are hard. Devotionally, it can be difficult in moments. But then there's these moments where the reality of who Jesus is right now is reigning over history as Lord, Creator, King, ruler of the kings on earth, firstborn from the dead, all those things. And it takes me away from rulers and powers I want to invest my time and energy into that are going to let me down. And two, in my own uncertainties, my own places of suffering or doubt, or where is this world going? Where is my life going? Seeing the power and sovereignty of Jesus as King and as directing us all towards a new heavens and new earth. Devotionally, that's worth pushing into.
That's a good note to end on. And Jeannie's supposed to stand by the camera that I'm supposed to look at. There it is. Okay. I can't get it. I couldn't do it. We will be back here next Monday, same time. And we'd love to have you join us again. Keep texting in your questions. We're going to keep those throughout the week, and we'll look at those before our next conversation. And we hope that we have you back here and that this was helpful to you. All right, until next week, keep the faith, and we'll see you soon.